We are good.
Alrighty. So, for those just joining us, this is our third episode
Yeah,
of Clash of Cinema.
yeah, we're 3 movies deep.
Three movies deep. Well, we're two movies deep, and we're about to be three movies once we get
Yes,
into this one.
true. That is true.
So far we've tackled the controversial Howard the Duck,
Hmm.
the ever popular Ghostbusters 2016, and now
Oh boy,
we're on
controversy.
to Spider-Man 3.
Spider-Man 3, yeah, which was the big anticipated summer movie of 2007 when it dropped, which
Mm-hmm.
was riding on the coattails of the amazingly great Spider-Man and then the even more
Better.
spectacular Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Um, so it had
Argue.
some big shoes to fill.
Yeah, I was gonna say, arguably, like, with all the different iterations of Spider-Man we had, I would say at the very least, most people will tell you that Spider-Man 2, if it's not the best one, it's gotta be close to the top.
It's up there for
And
sure,
I
without a
and
doubt.
I think it is the best one. I'm one of those
I
people,
agree.
but
I
yeah,
agree
it
with you.
just so it's so weird that that's what preceded what we're gonna talk about tonight.
Yeah. And even those that might say, with Tom Holland, like what was the last one? No Way Home. But
Mhm.
I'm like, No Way Home wouldn't have been as good without Spider-Man 2 or all of those Spider-Mans because all these villains came from this trilogy.
Mhm. 100%. And I mean, yeah, it wouldn't have had the gravitas and the weight behind it, like especially the emotional weight. Like, you get kind of like you come full circle with some of the characters, and it's really weird too because like with Sandman, for example, right? You get Sandman in No Way Home, and they want to help him,
Mhm.
and I mean, it took all of Spider-Man 3 before we even kind of had any kind of care for him because he was just kind of they just like shoehorned him in there as hard as they could.
Absolutely. The
But
Spider-Man
by No
3
Way
should
Home,
have
yeah. Wait,
focused
what?
on him. I said
Mm,
Spider-Man 3 should have focused solely on Sandman.
yeah. And I think part of the problem was like Spider-Man 2 we'd had Doc Ock, we'd had
Amazingly great.
Green Goblin,
Mhm.
well, kind of right. We had Harry on his way to Green Goblin,
Yes. Mhm.
but it was mostly Doc Ock.
Mhm. Yep.
And then by the third one, they're like, "Oh, there's a number three on the title, so we have to do three bad guys, right?"
Yeah. That seemed to be the MO for a lot of
Wrong.
movies.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I just let me ask this. So I mean, like part of the reason we sit down and talk about the movies that we talk about is controversy.
Hmm.
I mean, I can think of reasons why this movie was not good,
Hmm.
but controversy is sort of next level.
Yes.
There's something about it that really like stands out.
Hmm.
And I mean, controversy is usually a negative connotation, but I guess
Right.
doesn't necessarily have to be. What do you think about this one? Fits it into that category of controversial?
I would think the one thing that would do it was Venom. Because Venom for me was, when we knew Venom was coming, you always had this picture of who Eddie Brock was and who Venom
Hmm.
was. And he was much larger, more, intimidating villain than,
And
Topher
and and
Grace.
then I was
Not to just
I was
write
about to
Topher
say
Grace.
that.
He was fine. Yeah,
Hmm.
he's a fine actor, but he definitely didn't fit, what I would think of him. He was almost like he looked too much like Peter, and I was almost like they're too equal. And it's more fun when Spidey's fighting a bigger, badder
Topher
villain.
Grace almost looks like he should have been who they cast if we'd continued with the Spider-Man movies and eventually got to
Yeah.
Agent Venom. Like he might have made
Mhm.
a better Flash. I mean,
Mhm.
we already had a Flash in that universe, but like with the blonde hair and the more like
Yes.
kind of slim look,
Mhm.
he's not imposing. And Venom, like Eddie Brock, is supposed to be, he's like a loser, but he's supposed to be kind of imposing.
Yeah, he's a bigger, more intimidating physique than
I mean, and that's
Topher
one of
Grace.
the things that like when they eventually got to Ed Hardy or not Ed Hardy, Tom Hardy,
Tom Hardy, yeah.
um, like you know what I mean? Like he embodies both of those. Like he
Yes.
he comes off like the loser
Yep.
really well, and then
Yep.
the Venom form looks like what Venom should look like.
Exactly. That's what I would feel like. Because when
Hmm.
Topher becomes Venom, he looked like Spider-Man with just like a crazier mouth. And I always felt like that was just not enough to make Venom that villain that that grandiose, much larger than life villain that he always was.
He almost reminded me of I don't know if you ever played or saw like the early Mortal Kombat games. There was a character named, oh God, I'm gonna forget, but he had like a green head. And like,
Hmm.
like when you do the finalities, he'd like eat people's
Yep.
heads off
Oh,
and
yep, yep.
stuff.
Hmm.
And he could spit acid. But
Hmm.
like Topher Grace's Venom looked a lot like that guy in body type, just black head instead of green.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm gonna like comment on this video like after him, and I'm gonna be like, it was this guy. It was
Yeah, right, right. Yeah.
Baraka. It's gonna be the guy's name's gonna be Venom in Mortal
Yeah.
Kombat, and I'm gonna laugh.
Yeah. And the thing is I feel like I'm guessing this is more on the studio side, is that they were
Mhm.
probably pressuring that you got to have Venom. We need Venom. I really think they've been trying to push Venom since
Mhm.
James Cameron was going to make Spider-Man back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And so they're finally like, we need Venom, we need Venom. And so I don't feel he was handled as well as he should have been. Um, because I feel like Venom should have been his own villain in the movie instead. And I think they could have set that up for a fourth film and it would have been so much better. I really think we,
I I agree, and I know a lot of other people agree. I mean, like even to this day, you see clickbait meme articles sometimes about
sure,
like, oh, hey, look, the studios have finally agreed to do the Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire. Like they've
right,
talked about that for years. I mean, if for no other reason than to try to like get people to think about something other than three.
right, yeah,
Um,
right.
One of the other things that I think I I don't, and again, controversies hard to like use necessarily, but it could be. I imagine a lot of fans had trouble with Spider-Man 3 watching how well they handled like the Uncle Ben stuff in number
Hmm.
one,
Hmm.
just to turn around and like shoehorn in Sandman to
Yeah,
say, oh, by the way, this was the guy, you
yeah,
the reasons that you felt bad and all the things that happened didn't even happen the way you think it happened.
right.
And having to accept that like three
Yeah,
movies later, like later.
yeah.
I mean, I'm
That's
sure that bothered fans. Like, whoa,
it,
whoa,
well,
whoa.
yeah, it's kind of a kick in the pants where you're like, wait a minute, we were invested this way. This is how it was. And all of a sudden you're saying, no, that's not. We have to
Hmm.
switch gears
And for
again.
what reason to put in a bad guy that
Right.
they want you to sympathize for, and then on top of it, but like is also a third of the villains in the movie. So you have
Right.
2 hours to establish three villains.
Hmm.
So
And out of the three, who do you think was the most like that was done the most dirty, I guess, out of the three?
probably Harry, to be honest. I
Yeah,
mean, he got.
that's what I would have said too.
I mean, he had the through line story and build up for
Mhm.
3 movies,
Yep.
and I mean like his version of the Goblin sucked, and I mean it
Yeah.
just I almost think that if we were gonna go with this whole idea of the third and the fourth movie, three needed to wrap up this Goblin trilogy. Like we had
Hmm.
Goblin in one, we had Harry like kind of on edge and teetering, and then finding out about Peter at the end in two,
Hmm.
and three should have just been the like I because I know there was some amount of time jump between two and three, but
Yep.
like three should have been like a pretty close pickup, and it needed to be about Harry like getting the toxin, getting the gear, and just
Yeah.
going for Peter because like there's no reason for him to wait.
Right.
He's lost
Right.
MJ, he's lost his dad, he's
Yeah.
lost his best friend is for all he knows. They could have gone full tilt with him.
Mhm.
I don't know. You could have had Ant-Man, Sandman as like a kind of a B
Yeah.
tier villain in the film.
Yep.
You know, if you wanted to have Peter like fighting somebody else between stuff,
Yes.
cool. And then just
Yes.
post credit scene that black suit because that
Hmm.
just needs to be its own thing.
Yes. That's exactly like they could have introduced like the way the meteorite hit the near them. I was fine with all that. It followed him home. Great.
Hmm.
Then they could have slowly like keep reminding us that it's there, and then at the end, it consumes the suit, and he's now Black Spider-Man at the very end. And you're like, oh boy,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
gonna be
Cliffhanger for
amazing.
the fourth one. Yeah,
Yeah, and then really build up the Eddie Brock relationship in the that fourth
in
film.
the fourth one. Yeah, and
Introduce
then
him in the
you
third.
don't have the specter of Harry.
Yeah.
You want to introduce maybe you want to introduce Black Cat instead and give
Mhm.
Peter the tension between his relationship
Yep.
with Mary Jane that's like maybe now on the rocks because he's got the
Yeah.
black suit, and then Black
Yeah.
Cat becomes more appealing because she's
Yeah.
dangerous. You
Yeah.
know, okay, I have the black suit. Maybe he had considered just doing something that I shouldn't do with somebody I shouldn't do it with.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. Yeah. And it could have. I think it would have been such a more involved story, and it probably would have rivaled what we saw in the second film because they really would
mhm,
have really elevated the emotional level, taken the character to that next
mhm.
stage, like
And
given a
that's
sense of
part of why like I think people that's why the people love two so much. I think because with Doc Ock, you have that whole arc through that movie with him and Peter, and
yeah.
eventually, by the end, it's coming full circle,
Mhm.
and
It's a
he
perfect
loses that.
balance in that.
Hmm.
He's a great villain, but he's also you can empathize with him. You can, really
Hmm.
connect between him and what he and Peter had. It was just well handled in that
Yeah, I
film.
mean,
It just felt
Peter
like they
has
were.
another surrogate father figure that he is gonna lose, or is slowly losing through the film.
Mhm.
Yeah, man, in fact, he can't. Anybody who tries to be his father figure should just walk the other way between
Right.
Dad, Uncle Ben, Norman. I mean, Norman
Right.
took a shine to him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's something of a father himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And then
Which I think
yeah.
he is the character I sympathized the most in that third film was
No.
was the butler there, Norman.
Oh, really?
Or not, the Bernard, was it Bernard? Is that the, am I right on that name?
Oh,
Um,
for like the
Harry's,
Osborne family butler?
yeah, the Osborne family butler. That's the
Yeah.
character I wound up empathizing with the most because I felt so bad at the end. He'd lost Norman, he lost Harry. He
Yeah.
pretty much he had nothing anymore, and it was just like because when he said that one moment where he's like, I've seen all these things in your father, and I love you like a son. It was like, and then Harry's gone. It's like, oh, poor Bernard here has got nothing left.
Yeah, I mean, Harry probably should have tried to embrace that relationship a little bit
Mm.
more, but I think at that point again,
Yeah.
he's just sort of he's fixated on very specific people, and his relationships with all those people are either done or irreparably damaged, and he's just like got tunnel vision. He doesn't realize like he could probably still live some kind of life if he realizes, okay, maybe Peter didn't kill my dad. Maybe my dad was, bonkers.
Mm.
Maybe MJ loved Peter and she made her own choice. And you know what I mean? Just like make all the right,
Right.
thought patterns rather than the extreme ones that he seemed to have all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I felt like that amnesia scene was a little off-putting. Because I think they just wanted to have that relationship back and kind of have like what we had in the first film. And, you know,
yeah, it was kind of a cop out.
yeah, it felt like it was just like, why is this even here? Because it was there briefly and then all of a sudden gone. We're back into him being the villain again. It just felt like it was just, I don't know, it was just so
I think they just didn't
bizarre.
know how they wanted to handle Harry as the bad
Mhm.
guy. I don't
Yeah.
think Harry knew how he wanted to be the bad guy. Like he had all this like pent up rage and emotion, but he also spent most of his life having other people do things for him. So, you're like, I have the desire, but I don't have the necessary action skills to like realize the desire, or he didn't up until, until he did. But
Yeah, and that conflict could have been played out so it really emotionally in the film, if they really got to focus more on how he was torn, this way with his father and torn with his friendship with Peter and all these things that could have really, really, really pushed his character to a really, really big precipice before they finally ended that arc with him. And it seemed like a missed opportunity for Harry. Yeah, he was done dirty in that film for sure. Um,
Yeah, the real Dirty Harry.
yeah, but yeah, 100%. Because I really would have liked to have seen him because we were so invested in him from that first and second film that this really should have given us that close
Hmm.
on that story.
I mean, the truth is, I don't know, maybe whoever was sitting there looking at the script thought like we've had two movies of Peter and angsty
Yeah,
interactions with Osborns that we maybe they didn't think the audience would want to sit through that a third time.
right.
Maybe they didn't consider that we would like seeing the emotional roller coaster come full circle,
Mhm.
but it is it's hard to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, and it's a lot of the repetitiveness too of the on again, off again Mary Jane romance, and then we finally get Gwen Stacy, which is
Mm.
great. And but I felt like she didn't really give us anything other than something to drive a wedge between Peter and MJ. And I really wish they could have done a little more with her. Um,
That was that
it's
was really
totally
never
over.
her like role either, too. I mean, like I get that they both existed in the comics as love interest for Peter, but
Yep.
I've read a fair amount of past Spider-Man. It never felt like they weren't Betty and Veronica for
No,
Peter.
not at all.
Um, if they
They were,
really wanted to get like a wedge driving character again, I think Felicia Hardy would have been the
yes, she
better
would have
bet.
been, because she's the one that, yeah, because Spider-Man's attraction to Black Cat was always that sort of thing
Well,
that
and
built
and
into
it's
that. And then his
it's
with
kind
Felicia.
of like too like Mary Jane liked Peter. I mean, like she got into situations in these movies with Spider-Man, but she didn't have some driving
Mhm.
force of a romance with Spider-Man. It was like here's Peter, and I'm interested in Peter, and Black Cat could have been like I'm interested in Spider-Man, and I don't really care about the guy underneath, and it could have been like a real dilemma for Peter, like trying to figure out, okay, am I Spider-Man and Peter's the mask, or am I Peter and Spider-Man's the mask?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is similar to the Batman Catwoman sort of,
Yeah.
relationship. There's that attraction between them as
Hmm.
when they're in costume. That's, always a really big draw with those characters. And I always felt like again, the knowing a lot of those stories with Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy was a love interest, yeah, during his college years, but he wasn't with like Mary Jane was gone at this point, before
Hmm.
she returned. So it wasn't like there was this, yeah, like you say, Betty Veronica, battle for
Nope.
affection thing.
Mhm.
So I felt like that just didn't feel right. And I whatever, they want to make Gwen the model that technically Mary Jane should have been. That was fine. I didn't have an issue with that. Because
Right.
she was a brainy girl and they made her that, and that was always fine. But
Mhm.
I just felt like there wasn't enough with her. And they had because there was a big relationship between Spider-Man and her father that was much more compelling than the relationship with Peter and Gwen, and we didn't get enough.
Because
They brought
because
him.
once again, Spider-Man's got daddy issues.
Yes. Yep.
You
100%.
cannot be a male father figure in his life and have a long expiration date.
Yeah, it does never ends well for them.
No.
Um, so yeah, with going backpedaling to Sandman. Sandman was never one of my favorite characters in the book. He's interesting and he has some good stories here and there, but he's like, and not quite like Penguin, but he's kind of like that character where he's interesting, but he doesn't always, you know, pull me in as much as he does. They've done great stuff with him over the years, and um, with Penguin,
Spider-Man, I should say, Spider-Man's always had some very like archetypical villains. Like,
yeah,
for him, it's very like nature and element based.
Yes.
Like either you're an animal or you're something that's driven from from a primal force of nature.
Mhm.
Your
Yep.
Hydra Man, your water, your earth, your wind, your fire. Like they're
Yep.
he just like would constantly be fighting. He's fighting nature. I mean, I think that's the metaphor.
Yeah,
And then
definitely.
over time, he got more complex villains that are
Mhm.
not so much those things. They're maybe like more moral like enemies. Like I'm sure some would argue that Green Goblin is like the embodiment of evil.
Mhm.
And then they ratchet that up. If you read Spider-Man comics in the last couple of years, they make like, oh God, what was that one that I guess spoilers for anybody that hasn't read this run, the one where Harry becomes like this like dead thing
Mhm.
that, oh God, what the hell was he? It was it had something to do with Harry being like a dead like reanimated thing that didn't look anything like him, and he had a new name, but he was like he had once been Harry Osborn. And I
Right.
looked at that and I'm like, wow, this is such a drastic departure from anything they've ever done from Spider-Man. But at the same time, like, you know, we're, you can only throw him against, the Rhino, the
Yeah.
Vulture, the
Right.
Dung Beetle for the, the 100th time.
But I like how they okay, so we have Flint Marko, he escapes from prison. He has this daughter, he's
Mm-hmm.
sort of estranged from, and he wants to help her because
Mm-hmm.
she had an ailment of some kind, and
Mm-hmm.
his estranged relationship with his wife, obviously from being in prison, and that was all great. And it would have been fine even as a subplot if they just, you introduce him this way, and then he gets into this, whatever he's trying to rob banks or whatever he's doing, and Spider-Man's battling him while, the bigger threat is happening with Harry
Yeah.
around us. Because I always felt like he wasn't a character that he was always a good character when he was with the Sinister Six, or if he was kind of like teaming up with another villain, he always worked better in those ways. Because on his own, I think Sandman was he was never as strong as, Rhino, who was always more, interesting, or Venom or whatever. But you know,
Mhm.
I think on his own he would have been, it wouldn't have been enough for the film. But again, if we're finishing up the Harry story and he's a subplot, it would have been perfect for that.
Yeah, in fact, like again, just to go back to like the whole like Venom being a separate movie, it would have worked a lot better because um I think I think Peter could have appealed to Kane in the same way he ends up doing in No Way Home, because like he has a motivation for the things he's doing. He's not like he's not truly evil or truly bad. And I think we could even argue that neither is Harry, and he could
Right.
almost use Sandman as both a physical ally against him and like a emotional one. Like say, hey, look, this guy who had a hand in killing my uncle in this continuity,
Mhm.
who was really just trying to make a buck to help his daughter. If I can forgive him, then maybe you can forgive me for, the parts that you feel I've played in your life that have driven you to this.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that would have made for a great thing, because it would probably have come, in a third act where it would have been it would have probably been like a either Spider-Man lives or Green Goblin lives kind of moment. And that hesitation, gets the villain sometimes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you're right. Now, here's a conundrum of a question. With
Mm.
Harry, with Peter saying, "Oh, I forgive you" to Flint, does that sort of negate the whole purpose of him being Spider-Man? Because to a degree, if you think he didn't have that opportunity when that guy who killed Ben died, there was no forgiveness, and there will never be forgiveness there. So it almost was that driving force, like, this is what happened. I can't let it happen that way again. I've got great power comes great responsibility, the whole theme there. That suddenly he's like, well, okay, I forgive you. It's over.
I don't think it would have come off that way, because like one, this is years into him being Spider-Man,
Mhm.
and two, you could almost take the Uncle Ben gold standard advice there and apply it to that situation, right? Like Peter has the power to forgive.
Mhm.
How's he
Yeah,
going to use it?
Good point. Certainly.
So,
Yeah,
and I mean,
it's
if you
one
could
of the things
hold
I
on
thought
to it
about,
like a, yeah. I was
about
just
that.
gonna
Would that, how would that have happened if, back in the first film, he was able to say, "Oh, I forgive you." It would have changed the
yeah.
course of his actions. But yeah, you're right. Like here it is several years later.
Well,
He,
and that's
he had
why
quite,
too, right? Like if it had been him confronting Marco that first time, he probably wouldn't have forgiven him, and Marco
no.
probably would have suffered the same fate as the other guy.
Yep.
Because I don't remember if they say exactly like if I don't think he had the Sandman powers until after he killed Uncle Ben.
Yes. He
Yeah,
got
because
it after he escaped prison.
yeah,
He fell
yeah.
into that molecular thing, and it broke him
Right,
apart.
right. And yeah, that's what I'm pretty sure had been. So, like, yeah, he would have just suffered the same fate because Peter wouldn't have been ready. And
Right.
it just, story wise, it also just wouldn't have made sense because he would have, it wouldn't have gone through the experiences and lived the life
Mhm.
to, do that. And, honestly, I wouldn't expect most people to. You know what I mean? Like, you wake up tomorrow and somebody, did something to like a family member, who would have the ability to immediately forgive? I can't think of anybody.
No, you're
But
right.
but with
And
some
think
time
too,
and lived experience, sometimes you see these people visit like somebody on death row who killed their child, and you're like, you know what? I'll never forget. I'll never like 100% like be okay with you, but I've had time to think and live and this and that, and some people you have find the strength to be able to do that.
and if you think about the
Mm-hmm.
scene in Spider-Man 2 where he
Hmm.
told Aunt May about that, Aunt May slapped him, and there was
Hmm.
like that moment that
Yeah.
might have given him that ability to say, "Okay, I can forgive now," because he sees it in Aunt May, and he sees it at that moment where it's that tension sort of breaks apart, and they
Yeah.
they find that, you know, the way to reconnect, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I don't even know if he would have been ready in Spider-Man 2 yet. I
no,
mean, like
I
he
agree.
he would have been closer, but he still had a Doc Ock to lose.
Hmm.
And I mean, like in the same way that Harry lost him, he lost Harry. I mean, like
Hmm.
by the end of two,
Hmm.
it's kind of like that scene you see sometimes where they're like, if you walk out the door, don't you come back? And it
Hmm.
was like if Peter broke those chains and jumped out that window, like it was over.
Yeah. Hmm. It's true. It's true. Good point.
Yeah.
But I
If
mean,
oh no, go
okay.
ahead.
Well, I was gonna, we've kind of talked about the things that are you know, problematic with this film, and these are things that people have been saying since the movie's release. But
Hmm.
there's some good things in there. There's a lot of good things that I mean, it's a Spider-Man adventure. Tobey Maguire is a great Peter Parker, plays the character so well. I mean, he really like jumped off the pages of the comics from the 60s and 70s and even
Yeah.
80s to that degree. So I mean, you have that. I mean, Mary Jane, Harry, to have them back together in the film was wonderful to see again, and
Hmm.
um, being able to kind of see where to some degree there wasn't much progression in their lives. I mean, Peter's still in that junky apartment. Mary Jane still hasn't really found the success as an actor at that point, but um, regardless of that, they're still, they're still able to, find their, the commonalities and their things that keep them together, which is
Hmm.
always a pleasure to see.
Hmm.
All those actors are wonderful in their roles.
Hmm.
I
That's
would
true.
say. And I'm trying to think of some, I mean, some things that I really liked in the film when I was watching it. I really liked the scenes with where he was, anytime he's coming out with Spider-Man, and he's always like, this, even more so, the scenes where Peter is like watching Spider-Man. Like there was a scene where he's watching him on the big monitor on the building there, and the kids are like, "Oh, Spider-Man!" He's like, "Hey, it's gonna start up again in a minute." He's always kind of really, he's proud of being Spider-Man, um,
Hmm.
but doesn't use it to this degree where it's, it made him you know, a bad person or whatever. You know, he doesn't use it for his own selfish gains. So it's always, you know, those are always things that I think they've always kept that theme throughout, which is good. And when he became the evil black suited Spider-Man there, for that brief time, there were some fun moments in there, but they always felt a little, I don't know. I mean, like I felt like he was bad, but he wasn't bad. He was kind of
He was,
silly.
I mean, for lack of a better term, he was like drunk. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like the black
exactly.
suit took away his inhibitions.
Hmm. 100%.
And I mean, that doesn't necessarily make you good, bad. It's more
Right.
just like, here's the the wall that's standing between me and the thing that I would do in this situation. And oh, black suit took it away.
Mhm.
I think one of my favorite moments in that movie, and it's mundane. It's nothing, too great, but I like his interactions with the whatever he is. He's like Hungarian, his like
Mhm.
landlord,
Yes.
and you know, he just like well, he I think he messes with him or
Yeah.
does something to him when
Yeah.
he's black suited, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, I thought to myself, like, this is pretty great because in the first movie, or not, I think maybe it was two actually.
Ooh, yeah.
He keeps getting hassled for rent by the guy, and
Yep.
we're watching, and like we're the inhibitions that we're screaming at him, like, do something to the guy, like, tell him to
Yeah.
shut
Right.
up, tell him to get him the money, whatever, like,
Yeah.
don't let this
Yeah.
guy push you around. So like
Mhm.
to kind of see like some of the moments like that, like come a little bit full circle by three, even despite all its problems, was like cool, like, hey, we didn't forget about this, we're going to show
Yeah.
you now what Peter would do,
Mhm.
that you were screaming at the screen the last time this happened.
And that's almost like it's right from the way he behaved in the comics. So those moments where
Hmm.
he'd just explode angrily and he'd be
Hmm.
much more, you know, just easier to set off. There was easier to trigger his anger. And I
Hmm.
thought that was, yeah, that scene definitely portrays that successfully. And that
Hmm.
and same with he always I always like the interaction with that character as well as the daughter, the Hungarian
Hmm.
man, his landlord's daughter. She was
Yeah,
always
she
a
got kind of
interesting
like a
character.
crush on Peter.
Mhm. Yeah, but at the same time doesn't act on it, but she's always kind of there to, you know,
Hmm.
she'd be there if he yeah,
If he ever took her up on it, yep.
yeah, if he smiles in her direction, she'd be right there. But it was always kind of very sweet. All those scenes with her, even when he was Dark Peter, he wasn't, you know, he never did anything to her other than make her bake cookies for him and get me some milk and you know, silly things like that. But
Which,
um,
God's honest truth, like, even if he was just asking her to do that, like, nicely,
she
she
would have
probably
done it.
would have. It might
She would
not
have
have
done
even been an inconvenience to her.
it. Exactly. Yeah. She still would have been like, yeah, sure, no problem. She still would have done it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that all the Spider-Man movies are benefited from was that I
Mhm.
love is the direction by Sam Raimi,
Mm,
who
of course.
really the stuff he does with his camera is just so incredible, and it's so perfect for Spider-Man because of just the kinetic movements and all the through the air and everything like that. It's just wonderful. So again, that's the thing with this film that definitely draws me back. So I love the visuals
Mm.
um, that
I
he
think
does.
they definitely used a lot more practical effects back then before we got to
Yes,
like amazing, and it was pretty much like CGI for the majority.
right.
Because I think it was the opposite with Spider-Man. Like, you'd get like those swinging moments, like either at the beginning or the ends of the movie, that were like, okay, you could tell this is CGI, but then as they like closed up on stuff, it was, I have to figure they were practical effects. I mean, they looked, you can kind of tell when you're looking at CGI, or you used to be able
Yep.
to. I mean, it's getting harder and harder now, but
But yeah, a lot of times when he'd run and leap and you'd see him
hmm,
go in the sky, you know, he's on wires, you know, they're doing the
yep.
practical stunts there. And I always love those sorts of moments because, you know, that's
I
him doing it.
I remember that was like a big turning point for like, like Marvel trying to sell kind of Marvel to the wider audiences. Because I mean, we'd gotten a couple things already. I think we'd gotten Blade in like 96 or 97, but his
Yeah, it
his
was
stuff was all
around.
pretty much just like, okay, he's got powers, but this is combat, like hand-to-hand choreography.
Yep.
And then you got X-Men, which
Mhm.
definitely like change the bar, right? Like that would have been 2000, I think. Maybe
2000,
Spider-Man
yep.
Spider-Man 1 was probably 2001.
2002.
Oh,
So,
two, right.
yep.
So because like came off the heels of X-Men, even though they were
Yep.
from coming from different studios at the time, there was like, okay, cool, like, I mean, like X-Men probably wasn't nobody was swinging around, but I mean they were definitely like breaking barriers, for trying to
They
get
were.
these things, and the costuming, the like trying to show powers on the screen and stuff like that. And I just remember when Spider-Man hit the screen, like it really seemed like kind of like a cultural milestone, despite the
Yeah.
fact that we'd gotten other things before it. It's like, okay, all right, what do you got for us, Spidey?
hmm Yeah, I think you could easily go back in, in time and look at the specific comic movies that really ushered what a comic movie should be. Superman the movie,
Toxic
Batman.
Avenger.
Yeah, yeah, Toxic Avenger. You're right. You're right there. Batman 89.
Hmm.
You know, X-Men, Spider-Man. Those the first ones of those really shaped it. If without
Yeah.
those, we would not have the MCU the way it is now. It really helped lay the framework for what works
Yep.
in the hero genre. And I mean, each those franchises, Batman, Superman, suffered a very similar fate that Spider-Man did at this point. By their third films, there were things that just went in different directions than the fan base was expecting. And I'm sure we'll
Don't
discuss
worry,
that.
folks. Don't. I was gonna say, don't worry, folks. We'll get to Bat credit card sooner or later.
Oh, like, without a doubt, that's a great one to hit. But but still, even with that, you can still, sit down and watch Spidey 3, enjoy it for flaws that it has.
Hmm.
Um, and it has many. Um, but it's still it really, I think without this, um, I think maybe if this was even more successful, maybe it would have stalled the MCU from really getting where it was as fast as it did because
That's true.
I I think that seeing it say, okay, this didn't work, we need to be a little bit more vigilant with what we do from this point forward. Because I mean, obviously, Iron Man was already in the planning; it was already probably in production at this point when
Hmm.
83 hit. So they're like, okay, we don't want to do what they did here. Let's make sure we keep this, on task, and we don't go in directions that could easily, derail what we're planning. And
Right.
so for that, you have to give it some props.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's like with science, right? Like even when you fail, you succeed because you learn from what
Mhm.
you did. I mean, aspects of your experiments will yield positive results, and then the ones that
Yeah.
don't will still yield positive results, just in a roundabout way.
And I think I'd rather see it happen in a
Hmm.
franchise at this point because, despite the fact that we love these films and they were, the two being one of the best Spider-Man films, we needed it to sort of lead into what prepared that Marvel universe for something, to make sure that it
Hmm.
was going to be much more connected, much more consistent in the product that it delivered than kind of falling for that. We need all these villains, or we need to, do that in there. And once they had that success, the studios are like, "Yep, do what you're doing. We're not going to step in and force you to do this or that with these movies." So I think it helped to a
Yeah.
degree.
So closing arguments on this. If you had to, you've seen all the Spider-Man movies. You got. So what do we got? We got 8 Spider-Man movies to choose
Yeah,
from.
a lot.
To plumb like your actors, your studios, your whatever.
Mhm.
Do you have a Spider-Man storyline that you would like to see in film?
Hmm.
And if so, which Spidey would play the Spidey in this movie?
I think if you could do one with Tom Holland, and I think one that I would like to see with Tom Holland would be Kraven's Last Hunt. But I think that's a
Okay.
tough one because you have to
Mhm.
establish Kraven.
Oof. Well, we all
We had the
know
movie.
how that's going.
Right now. And because when you do Craven right, he's a
Hmm.
fascinating character. And
Hmm.
that Craven's Last Hunt was
Hmm.
unbelievable. That I remember that comic just being one of the just really great story. Um, the other one that I would think of, and it's just to piggyback on that, it's from there was that reporter, or no, the cop that he worked with that was murdered, and she was like a detective. I can't remember her name now off the top of my head, but that would be another one
Is
that
it the one that becomes like Wrath or whatever?
I don't
Is it
think.
Watanabe?
No, not that one. It was like the Wolf or something like that. I can't remember.
Hmm.
I'd have to go back and look at it.
Hmm.
But it was. I remember that story arc. It was sometime I think around the in Roger Stern's uh,
Okay.
run back in the late 70s, early 80s. That was another good one that I really liked. Um, but I think I want to say Gene DeWolf, but I don't know if that's correct. But it's there was a really good story where he was working with somebody closely on a case and she got murdered through that. It was something that really impacted Spidey. You know,
Mm,
much like the death of Gwen Stacy and then the death of her
yeah,
father and all those moments that really sort of push him further and further, but he still kind of stays the course. What about you?
that's true.
What story would you like to see?
Superior Spider-Man.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, and I think I would mess around a little bit with the whatever universe we end up getting. I would do a Molina as Doc.
Okay.
Um,
Yes.
and but I think I would do Garfield instead of uh, Toby. Not because I don't think Toby could do it, but I mean Superior Spider-Man is one of my favorite Spider-Man runs, and they got like 32 issues out of it. So I would almost kind of envision it as like a multi-film story, and
Mhm.
I think they could squeeze more out of Garfield than Toby for something like that.
Yeah.
And and with Tom, I mean, he's done his three movies and his couple of Avengers movies, but the guy still looks so damn young. And
It's
I mean, like with Superior Spider-Man, you have to like strike a balance between, a guy who's looks like he's lived a little bit of Spidey life, but still young enough that Doc wants to mind swap with him and believe that he'll get
yeah.
mileage out of him.
Yeah.
And I think Garfield is kind of the sweet spot for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked Garfield as he got done dirty. I feel bad because that first one was great.
Hmm.
But I think that second one fell in the same trap as the third film of the
Too many
McFarlane
villains,
trilogy.
trying to juggle too many
Yeah.
villains.
Tried to jam too much in there. And it's like that the Green Goblin story just it was like let's force this into the story and it just felt like it
Oh
wasn't
my
ready.
God, no.
Yeah, it didn't feel ready and it just felt like I don't know, it just didn't feel as fulfilling as it could have and that which was too bad because he had a good start and I was really looking forward to that. Electro was just I don't know, he just wasn't as charismatic. He worked great in the No Way Home. He just
Yeah, I
in the
think
middle.
he's another one where like if they had just focused on Electro,
Mhm.
been okay, but Electro and this and that,
Yeah. Then Rhino peppered in a couple
yeah,
small a
yeah.
little much in that one. But yeah, I would like to have seen. Yeah, I think any of those stories would be really nice to kind of focus on. Um, Sometimes I wish though that they would do something similar that DC does, where you
Okay.
get those animated films
Oh
of just
yeah.
of a story arc, and that
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would be
those
so good. I don't know why they don't
I
take
don't either.
advantage of that.
I think Marvel just kind of did it every now and again. Said, "Hey, here's this story."
Yeah, especially when it's the things that can be self-contained.
Mhm.
Why not? I mean, I don't know. I think they've just
Yeah.
kind of raised the white flag to their animated department in
Mhm.
terms of film anyway. Like their shows have been pretty on point the last like couple of years with Disney Plus.
Mhm.
So maybe that's their plan instead to like, go more long form and then kind of introduce stories that they feel need to be touched on. I mean, like in X-Men 97, they kind of did some like Goblin Queen, Future
Mhm.
Cyclops Phoenix stuff that like theoretically you could have done a movie for that, but you could
Yeah,
also pepper it in all throughout the season and make it like a long form story. And
sure.
I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, I'd be into that. But yeah, it'd be nice if to see some of that somehow. Yeah, I hope they do give us some of these stories in that way. Because I mean, really, Spider-Man's the way they've handled him has been wonderful in the
Hmm.
MCU, but it's always been stories that are, kind of new to the MCU.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to
Or
see
just
some of the stories.
or just in whatever way they can adapt it to fit the universe rather than
Right.
do do the character and fit the character's story into the universe. It's almost kind of like for Spider-Man, like the universe dictated for him what he could do
Hmm.
versus the other way around. And I
Yeah.
sort of hope that when they come back around for their fourth movie that they kind of do that. They're like, okay, here's Spidey, he's street level, and
Hmm.
he's kind of just doing his own story. And then if it happens to have a bearing on what's going on in the rest of the universe, cool. And if not, well, that's sort of what happens when you're a street level hero.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked how that ended because it really sets it up to be like we can start from anywhere now. We can
Yeah.
start from the beginning almost and really give you a classic Spidey tale. So they could do something like that.
Only time will tell.
Yes. And it's also good too that there was no bad blood between Sam Raimi and the Marvel studios after this film.
Mm-hmm.
Because he came back to direct Doctor
Doctor
Strange,
Strange,
Multiverse of
Multiverse of
Madness.
Madness.
So I was glad when I heard he was directing that because I'm like, oh, good. Because he does have a unique vision, and it's fit for comic world in
you,
any
you know,
in any
Sam Roy Raimi was okay for that, but really the breakout star was Pizza Papa.
100% Pizza Papa. He needs to come back in something, do something with that.
He's got to get paid.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Bruce Campbell can do no wrong. I'll say that. All right.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts or any closing thoughts on Spider-Man 3?
I think that's it on this one. I
Yeah.
mean, you can let us know in the comments, how you feel
Yeah.
about Spider-Man 3 and let us know what we should be watching next.
Yeah. Give us some suggestions. There's a lot of threes we could hit. I'm sure there's a three-peat we could
Hmm.
continue on for a while.
Yep.
Right.
All
So
right,
on
guys.
yeah,
Well,
that's the cinema.
yeah, we'll catch you guys on the
Okay.
next one.
Yeah.
Take care.